Happy Monday, everyone. This is Martha with Nature Niche, coming to you from the Karner Blue Nature Preserve, Michigan Nature Association property in west central Michigan. And the topic I want to share with you today is one of my favorites, Karner blue butterfly. This butterfly species is federally endangered, and it is listed as threatened in the state of Michigan. And I just want to stress the point that our rare species are integral parts of our landscape ecosystems. So if we take a look around, this is a great example of oak and oak pine, savanna and barrens and dry sand prairie. And without this sort of habitat, we wouldn't have this lovely butterfly species, Karner blue butterfly, or KBB. So as you can see here, we have a female Karner blue butterfly hanging out on this spotted knapweed. And Karners are about 1 inch in wingspan, and the males are a beautiful silvery blue. They have a dark border with a white fringe, and in comparison, the females are a pretty purple blue towards the center of their bodies with darker brown wing edges, and the females have that pretty row of orange crescents along the lower edge of the hind wing. The underside of both species is a pretty pearly gray, and they have several black spots rimmed in white towards their bodies, and then crescents or rows of black, and then orange and teal spots on the inside margin of both their forewing and their hind wing. And those spots become less pronounced as you move forward on the forewing. And again, with that dark border and light fringe. So the males tend to emerge before the females, and the adults only live about 5 days. So pretty awesome to see one today. Really excited about that. Karners depend on a native plant called wild lupin. It is their only host plant, so they only lay their eggs, and their caterpillars or their larvae only eat the vegetation, the leaves of wild lupin. So without wild lupin, and without the prairie habitats and oak barrens and savannas that support that wild lupin plant, we can't have this beautiful butterfly species. So this species has 2 broods in Michigan. It overwinters as a larvae, and the first adults emerge usually end of May, early June. That's called the first flight of the Karners. And then those adult butterflies breed, lay eggs, and the second brood, the second set of adults, emerges in usually early to mid-July, and they can sometimes be seen even into early August. So an interesting life cycle, beautiful habitat required by this species, and you can also find it in power line and road rights of way that are artificially kept open. So these habitats really require natural fire disturbance to keep them open, but in some places where the vegetation is managed along roads and along power lines, you get these refugia habitats where the woody vegetation has been cleared out purposefully by humans, and you get these butterflies surviving there as well. So I just want to stress that it's very important when you're visiting public lands or managing your own property that you avoid stepping on wild lupin. And if you're going to use heavy equipment, really try to plan to do those kinds of activities in the winter. Over 4 inches of snow cover. If you're mowing, raise the blades up 6 inches. That extra snow cover protects this butterfly, its larvae that hang out at the base of the lupin plants that have died back for the winter. If you're going to use herbicide, hopefully to control invasive species or something like that, make sure you're doing spot treatment and using that on non-windy days to minimize drift. And in general, it's good not to drive around, use a lot of equipment May 15th through August 15th, and in that way you're avoiding both adult butterfly flight periods and not hitting the butterflies with your vehicles. And it's really important to avoid lupin patches, to know where they are and stay out of them altogether if you can. If you can't, maybe going in on foot where you can be careful not to step on the plants because you don't want to crush the eggs or the larvae while they're developing. It's also very important not to touch or net these butterflies. You'd need a federal permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to handle them. And one of the major threats to this species is collection. So it's very important that you do not collect these species. They are so rare that just taking 1 or 2 butterflies out of the breeding population could have a significant impact. Other threats this species is facing include habitat successions due to fire suppression. So without fire, the surrounding oak and pine forests close in, and also poorly timed or executed management and maintenance practices. So burning large areas, butterflies in general are fire sensitive species and the eggs and larvae perish. Or mowing at the wrong time when you could impact the wild lupin, the eggs, the larvae, that sort of thing. Also, habitat conversion and fragmentation due to development and other land uses like grazing. So all of those things are threatening the habitat and this particular species. So please come enjoy these beautiful landscapes, public lands, and these lovely creatures, but you know, be respectful, wear clean clothing and shoes so you don't introduce invasive species, don't trample or pick prairie plants. And some neat places to visit are the Michigan Nature Association's Newaygo Prairie Nature Sanctuary, this Karner Blue Nature Sanctuary, Cool Ball Prairie in the Newaygo area. There are really some beautiful landscapes you can visit. And lastly, I just want to talk about what you can do to help support this rare species. So learn about it and tell others about it, and you know, help them understand the cost of habitat destruction and why restoring and managing habitat for this species is so important. You can volunteer, the U.S. Forest Service, some national wildlife refuges possibly, you know, contact the DNR and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for volunteer activities. There are groups that get trained and monitor the Karner blue populations. You can help with restoration projects, so doing prescribed burns, removing invasive species, and doing native seeding and plantings to restore the prairie vegetation that this butterfly depends upon. So the adults nectar on things like blazing star and black-eyed Susan, butterfly milkweed, those kinds of species. So making sure those are in the landscape is important as well. And if you own property within Karner Blue Butterfly Range, which there are 10 counties in the west central part of the Lower Peninsula of Michigan, you could work with a local conservancy, the Fish and Wildlife Service, possibly the Forest Service or the DNR, to preserve and create quality habitat on your own lands if you have those dry sandy soils and the potential for prairie and oak savanna and oak barren habitat. So plant lupin or conserve it if you have it on your property, and promote those other native prairie species that this butterfly nectars on. And lastly, report your sightings, your observations to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and or to Michigan Natural Features Inventory. You can do that by email. Michigan Natural Features Inventory has a special species reporting mechanism online, but just let them know when and where you see this species, and that can help as well. So excited to share this federally listed species with you, and we'll see if we can get some more shots today to share. Take care, bye. So I wanted to show you what the host plant of Karner blue butterfly looks like, wild lupin. We're here in mid-July, so it's starting to die back, but it's important to know what it looks like when you're out in Karner habitat so you can avoid stepping on it. So wild lupin is a perennial wildflower. It gets anywhere from a foot to about 2.5 feet tall. They have hairy stems and leaves that are palmately compound, like the palm of your hand, with numerous leaflets. Really nothing else looks like that, with that palmately compound in these prairie habitats. So that's a good key characteristic. They have 1 to 2 inch long pea pod looking capsules. This is a little bit of what's left of probably an aborted one, but they are hairy as well. And they start out green, looking like a hairy pea pod, and turn to a dark brown, and then they'll open and drop the seed and sort of curl around themselves. So this is the plant that we don't want to step on. There still could be Karner larvae, or the adult butterflies could be laying eggs on them. So as we're walking through this habitat, this is the plant we do not want to step on. Actually, here's another good view of what the pod-like fruit looks like after it's dried and open. So this lupin has already set its seed for the year. So when you see patches of this, it's best to walk around and not trample them. But it also means it's a good place to look for more Karner blue butterflies.